Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to Armor Animal Health's video series of Have You Heard? We're happy to bring you educational and relevant information on a weekly basis to help your operations bottom line. My name is Katie Halowinski, and I've worked at Armor for the last 11 years. Prior to that, I grew up around the corner from my grandparents' dairy farm in Brillion, Wisconsin, which is 30 miles south of Green Bay. Now this week, we're going to be talking about positive pressure ventilation systems. And the really cool part is we're going to be demonstrating how to tell if your barn has proper airflow as we tour a farm in Hilbert, Wisconsin. And it's just 5 minutes from where I grew up. So it's going to be really neat to watch. Stick around because you will not want to miss it. Now, today we have one of our professional services veterinarians, Dr. Vicky Lauer, joining us from her farm in Almond, Wisconsin. Hi, Dr. Vicky. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Katie. Yeah, so my name is Dr. Vicky Lauer. I've been working for Armor Animal Health for almost 7 years now. I graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia a little over 9 years ago. Moved up to Wisconsin after that, been here the whole entire time. I'm married to a farmer. I have 5-year-old twins who are starting kindergarten next week, so kind of a little nervous about that with having to wear masks and social distance. And then I have a hobby dairy goat farm as well. So I have a bunch of Nubian goats running around outside keeping me busy.
Yes, Dr. Vicky, I can attest to both Dr. Vicky's goat kids and real life twins that her kids are super cute. So I'm sure they're both, all of them are keeping you very busy.
Most definitely.
So before you begin today, Dr. Vicky, I want to tell our viewers, please ask any questions you have for Dr. Vicky. Like she said, she's been with Armor for 7 years. She has a large amount of experience, especially with calves. So feel free to ask questions in the comments below and we'll get them answered. You don't have to wait till the end to answer them. If you are watching the recorded version, which we always post after the live on YouTube, our YouTube channel, you can also comment there and we'll get those questions answered as well. So Dr. Vicky, let's take it down to the bare bones. What is a positive pressure ventilation system?
Yeah, so a positive pressure ventilation system, or a PPV system, which is one of the most common acronyms, basically it is a way of bringing outside air into a barn, especially a calf barn, and then distributing it evenly throughout the whole length of the barn, so that we're bringing that fresh air in, we're ventilating the barn, and making sure those calves have nice, fresh, clean air that's not full of ammonia and bacteria. There are 3 main parts of a PPV system. So the first thing you need is a fan, and the fan will be mounted typically on the outside of the barn, and it'll be blowing fresh air from outside into the barn. Now, attached to that fan or via a plenum box, there will be a tube, and this tube will have holes evenly distributed along the whole length of the tube, and that will allow air to exit the whole length of the barn. Again, that nice even pattern. And then you also need a hood on the outside of the barn that's going to protect the fan and make sure that birds, snow, rain can't get into the tube and ruin the tube. Now, one thing about positive pressure ventilation systems is that they need to be designed specifically for your barn. So one of the issues that I see fairly commonly is that a farm builds a new calf barn, and then either the builder puts in just a general fan and PPV system, or maybe they purchase kind of a pre-made PPV system from one of the fan companies. And unfortunately, most of those don't work because they're not specific for that barn. So it's either doesn't have enough air changes per hour, or the air coming out of the holes isn't going to the right place. So it's very important that if you're interested in a PPV system, that you have one designed specifically for your farm. There's definitely no one size fits all with the PPV systems. Depending on the size of the barn, sometimes you will need multiple tubes and fans if the barn is very long and or very wide, which is another reason why you need to have it designed for your farm. And you can design PPV systems for winter ventilation, which is what most farms use it for, but you can design summer ventilation systems as well to help cool those calves. And then now we're doing some ventilation designs for holding areas for cows to try and cool those cows too.
Got it. Very interesting. Like Dr. Vicky said, I know it's a very individualized basis, and like she said, it's not one size fits all. So it definitely takes an expert to come out and do those measurements. And if I remember right, Dr. Vicky, I went out with you 2 years ago to watch you do the demonstration on the PPV. But when I first started at Armor, this wasn't a very popular topic. When did this become popular? And maybe explain the history of PPV systems for our viewers.
Sure. So probably the PPV system started really building in popularity around 10 years ago. And that's because that's when a lot more calf barns were being built. So
Sure.
farmers or farmers' wives or employees were getting tired of having to deal with the cold, rainy, snowy Wisconsin winters. And so then we moved to putting calves in barns, more for kind of human convenience. And then, yeah, these design systems started coming around because we figured out that the ventilation just wasn't great in these barns. Also, farms were kind of turning more towards the automated feeding systems, putting calves on those nipple feeders. And with those types of with those types of feeding systems, you definitely do need them in a barn. So once we had these barns going, figured out ventilation was not great. There was a whole lot more pneumonia in the calves because unfortunately calves they don't generate very much body heat compared to their size. So when we think of a dairy cow, she's producing lots and lots of body heat, which is why our typical dairy barns are able to naturally ventilate, especially during the winter, because they're generating a lot of body heat, which then goes out through the middle of the barn and cool air comes in through the sides. For our calves though, they don't generate enough body heat. So basically that air just kind of sits inside the calf barn, or if the curtains are just kind of barely open at the top, the air goes right over the top of the barn and doesn't get any fresh air down to the level of the calves. And when we have poor ventilation, we're going to see more pneumonia in those calves, which then is going to lead to increased treatment costs. Depending on which antibiotic and supportive care you use, it can cost between $5 and $15 per calf per case of pneumonia. So it gets pretty expensive very quickly. But then the other downside of pneumonia is that when we treat a heifer for pneumonia, even just one time, it's going to decrease her average daily gain. And that decrease is going to lead to a decrease in her first lactation milk production. There have been a whole lot of studies going on lately. Most of them have found about an 1,800 pounds decrease in milk production on those heifers that are treated for pneumonia. So if you figure about $17 milk, that's going to be $300 less income from those heifers that were treated. So we really want to try and prevent pneumonia as much as possible. So that's the goal of a PPV system.
Absolutely, and that makes sense, Dr. Vicky. And I like how you explained the impact of poor ventilation and how it can cause a lot of issues like pneumonia. Just thinking of this, you said it cost $5 to $15 per head of treatment costs. To me, that's a no-brainer. I definitely want to make sure that my ventilation is good and that I install a PPV system at my farm. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, definitely a positive pressure ventilation system is the solution to minimizing pneumonia. Like I said though before, you need a positive pressure ventilation system that is specifically designed for your barn so that it's going to bring fresh air in at a constant rate, distribute it equally throughout the barn, and make sure that it's not drafting those calves in the winter. Because we don't want to draft on the calves because a draft can lead to pneumonia in and of itself. So we want to make sure, again, that it's well designed. And farms where I've designed PPV systems for them, we pretty easily and pretty consistently have taken pneumonia treatment rates from 20% down to around 5%. If they keep that system running all the time and are doing a good job with calf care in general.
Wow, that's amazing. 20% to 5%.
Yep.
That's awesome. So how does one go about designing a system for their farm?
Yep, so it's very important that you work with someone who has been trained by the Dairyland Initiative. So this is a special class that's offered at least once a year. Veterinarians can take the class as well as industry professionals, and you receive specific training on how to design these systems. Now there is a list of trained people available on the Dairyland Initiative website, which we do have available for you as a resource. So you can see there, there's kind of a map now where you can look at your location and try and find someone who has taken that class and is trained by the Dairyland Initiative. One thing, like I said before, make sure that you don't let the builder or the tube or the fan supplier just give you a generic PPV system unless that builder or the fan supplier has been trained by the Dairyland Initiative. Whoever trains or whoever designs your PPV system should give you a handout which has the Dairyland Initiative kind of logo on there. So when a trained professional is actually going to come out to your farm, they're going to look at a few different things. So the length of the barn, the width of the barn, the maximum height. So typically the height to the eaves or very tops of the rafters, and then the height to where the slope of the roof meets the sidewalls. Then you're going to want to look at the maximum number of calves that that barn will hold, and then also the general barn layout. So if there are garage doors or if there are some different like impediments that would make sure where you don't want the tubes to run. Say for instance, if there's a calf room running down the middle of the barn, we need to know where that's located so that we can make sure that the system won't run right through that spot. So then this trained professional will design a PPV system for you, provide you with that printout, which we showed just a little bit ago. And then the question I get very regularly is how much is this going to cost? And that very much depends on your barn and on the system. So for the most part, about the least expensive systems I've seen are around $1,000. That can go up to about $6,000 though, if you have a very long, a very wide barn where you need a lot bigger fan, a lot bigger tubes, or if you're using a more solid tube material, because the solid tube material will last a lot longer, but it's also a lot more expensive. But it's very important that you follow the specifications in that printout exactly. So I always put a big caveat on there that if you want to change any part of the design, if you want a different fan, if you want to move the holes around because maybe the tube supplier isn't able to put holes in that specific place, you have to let me know so I can redesign it, because there's a lot of aerodynamics, there's a lot of physics involved with designing these systems. And just a slight change can render the whole entire system ineffective. So follow those specs and then work with that trained professional if there are things that you want changed.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about aerodynamics and physics, I would much rather work with someone like you, a trained professional, than trying to figure that out myself, definitely. And I know you said the cost of them, but when you're looking at treatment costs for $5 to $15 per head, you just weigh out the ROI, and it's definitely worth it.
Definitely.
If you're looking at it from that standpoint. So I also want to remind our viewers, as we break here for a second, is just to ask questions in the comments. We're going to get those answered for you towards the end here. But I just want to remind people that now is the time. Don't wait to the end to ask a question, because we do want to get your questions answered. So Dr. Vicky, another question I have is, what are some other key points when designing the system that you consider?
Yeah, so when you are running a positive pressure ventilation system, especially during the winter, the whole point of it is that you're bringing outside air into the barn. So the barn is going to be cold. They're typically about 10 degrees warmer than the outside air. So if it's 0 degrees outside in the winter, it's only going to be about 10 degrees inside the barn. So it's going to be chilly, so we need to provide some extra support for the calves. So calf jackets, making sure there's nice deep bedding for those calves to nestle into, potentially adding a little more milk or adding extra feeding so that those calves are getting some extra calories so they can stay warm. But again, this is a trade-off because we're going to have a lot less pneumonia, so it's still going to pay for itself. Now, one thing, when you do have a winter PPV system, you turn it on to the maximum speed that the fan can go and you leave it on. You never ever turn it off. So I'll often get called in the winter to farms where the calves are having more pneumonia. I go to the farm, I see they have a PPV system, but it's off. And so one of the quickest, easiest fixes I say is turn that fan back on. Leave it on. Don't let anybody turn it off. If you need to put it under lock and key so that those employees can't turn it off, that's just fine. But that system needs to stay on. It needs to keep on running. Now, like I said, most of the time we're designing winter systems, but we can design summer systems as well. The summer systems, you would only use those when it's hot outside. Because they're designed completely differently. So a winter system, we want 4 air changes per hour in that barn, and we design it so the air is going to blow to about 4 feet above the height of the calves and no further, because again, we don't want to draft those calves. Now with the summer systems, we want at least 20 air changes per hour, sometimes as many as 60 air changes per hour. And we do design those to blow air right down to the ground so that we are drafting those calves, we are cooling those calves. So yeah, the summer system is completely different from a winter system. There is a company that has tubes with a baffle running inside those tubes, and they claim that they will work for summer and winter. I've analyzed them, I've put the specs into the Dairyland Initiative calculator. And unfortunately, that flex system doesn't provide enough air changes in the summer, and it provides too many air changes in the winter, and it will draft those calves. So I don't recommend going with that system. If you do want to have both a summer and a winter PPV system, you'll just have 2 separate, completely separate systems running. So typically the winter systems are going to be smaller fans, smaller tubes. The summer systems are a lot bigger fans, a lot bigger tubes. And then, yes, now we are designing some PPV systems for the holding areas for cows to help cool those cows while they're waiting to be milked.
Got it. And Dr. Vicky, like I mentioned earlier, you are definitely the expert in evaluating these barns. And I saw that firsthand when I went out with you to tour that farm in Hilbert. When a producer is evaluating their barn, what is important for them to look for, and how should they go about doing that?
Yeah, so evaluating a barn is actually pretty easy to do. It doesn't take a whole lot of equipment, but why we should evaluate these barns regularly, and I say at least yearly ideally, is we want to make sure that the fan is working, that the tubes, the holes aren't getting plugged with dust or other various things. For the fans, if they're a belt drive, those belts can kind of wear out and make the fan not turn at the speed that it should. And then also if there's just a lot of dust on the fan, that can slow them down. So we want to make sure that those systems are working the way they're designed. To evaluate them, you only need a couple pieces of equipment. So an insect fogger is one. You can get those from any Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, that sort of thing. And then you use mineral oil. You put that in the base of the insect fogger. The mineral oil is safe for calves. It's safe for people. It's not going to cause any damage if you inhale it. And you fog the barn with that mineral oil and the insect fogger, and you're able to see where the air goes. Now it is definitely a two-person job because one person needs to be fogging the barn. So they will stand outside where the fan inlet is. And then another person will be inside the barn watching to see where that air is going, making sure that the barn is clearing that foggy air the proper number of times per hour.
Yeah, like Dr. Vicky said, it's definitely a two-person job. And now we're going to show you some real life footage of the farm that we went to. And Dr. Vicky, while we're showing this footage, why don't you just describe to our viewers what you were looking at when you were doing the fogging, and so that they can kind of, I know the video will be muted, but just kind of walk us through what you are seeing and what you are doing.
Definitely. So here we just started fogging the barn. So you can see the tube running over the tops of the individual calf pens. You can see that fog coming out of the holes. And yeah, you'll see it just coming down as a fine mist. Doesn't bother the calves at all. I'm actually standing outside fogging the barn. So you can see me standing there trying to get all that mineral oil in. And what you'll notice, this barn has a lot of rows of calves. And by fogging the barn, we were able to see very clearly that the air was missing this whole center section of calves. So here we're looking at it from a different angle. And you can see there's no air hitting those calves directly underneath the tubes. It's going to that farther section of calves. So my recommendation for this farm, their fans seem to be working quite well. It had the proper number of changes per hour, but they just needed some new tubes with holes that are running over that center row of calves so that the calves can get the proper ventilation throughout the whole length of the barn as well as width of the barn.
Yeah, to get those straight down right underneath the tubes. I remember being amazed that day when I was with you, is like all the things you can learn from a simple insect fogger. It's crazy, right?
Yep.
Well, thank you for taking us and walking us through the PPV systems, Dr. Vicky. At this time, I'm going to look and see if we have any questions from our viewers. And we do have a few coming in, so we'll get started with our questions. Lance Paulson is wondering, how common are ventilation problems on farm?
So they are very common, especially in the calf barns. Kind of our optimum air quality is going to be in a calf hutch. So done a lot of studies looking at those bacterial air counts, and hutches, they definitely have the best air quality that we can manage in the dairy world currently. When we looked at calf barns without ventilation systems, those bacterial counts were through the roof, which is why there's so many more pneumonia problems in the calf barns. By installing a PPV system, though, we can get those bacterial counts about to the level of what is in a calf hutch. So we're getting that ventilation just about as optimum as we possibly can. That's a good question.
Got it. Pam is wondering, what is the range of the cost of a positive pressure ventilation system? And have you ever broken it down on a cost per head basis?
That's a good question. So it's about $1,000 to $6,000 depending on the specific barn design. So for some of my older dairy barns where we retrofitted them into a calf barn, typically the fans are going to run anywhere from $200 to $400, and then the tubes make up the bulk of the rest of the cost. The hoods don't have to be super fancy. They're not very expensive. As far as breaking it down cost per head, that I personally have not done, just because these systems are going to last at least 5 years. And sometimes the number of calves going through the barn can fluctuate during those 5 years. A lot of things can change. So I haven't broken it down by cost per head. But yeah, it's probably honestly pennies per head when you divide it out for that length of time.
Got it. Another question we have is, does this work on 3-sided calf barns?
Yes, it does. So with those, we can put the tube just about anywhere. Sometimes we'll go more on the peak Other times we'll go closer to that back wall. For really, really narrow three-sided barns, a lot of those can ventilate fairly decently. But if it's a deeper three-sided barn, there's still same issues with airflow in there. And using those tubes is a great way to get good fresh air coming in and decrease pneumonia even on those barns.
Great. A question we have from Megan Potter. She's asking, do positive pressure ventilation systems need to be cleaned? I have seen many with lots of dust and cobwebs. Thoughts on how to clean them?
Yeah, good question. And yes, they should be cleaned. So most of the time there are clips where you can take the whole bag down pretty easily, as long as you have people who can go up on ladders and just undo those clips. And some people will simply just wash them down. Otherwise, they'll take just like a dusting mitt or that sort of thing and dust the top, and then they'll spray out the inside of the tube with water. And a lot of times they'll go up, like hold the hose through some of the individual holes to try and concentrate on those really, really pretty spots. So yes, it is definitely done. It's kind of a chore. Ideally, you do that when you don't have very many calves in the barn so you don't get them wet. But that'd be about the only time when I turn the fan off on the winter ventilation systems.
Question kind of similar to that is, do you have to run a heater with your PPV system in the wintertime?
You could run a heater in the winter, but it gets very expensive because, again, the whole point of these systems is that we're bringing fresh air from the outside into the barn. So I do have some goat barns where we are heating those barns, and we do have a PPV system in. So what we do is we build a plenum box, which will connect the fan to a heat source, and then those two will both funnel into the tube. Now, the downside of the heater is that we are recirculating some of the air in the barn, but that's about the only way that we can heat that barn without it being super, super expensive. There are a few other options that I've seen for heating barns that have PPV systems. They're very pricey. I have not seen any of those farms go that route here in Wisconsin, but I know they do exist. So if you want more info on that, let me know and I can try and send you some info.
Sure. And what do we do for the people that don't have calf barns? How do they ventilate their hutches? How would this science apply to hutches?
Yep, so the hutches actually have about the best air quality that we can get besides just being out free on pasture. But you know, in the summer it can get pretty toasty in those calf hutches. So one easy way to get some good fresh air going through those hutches is just use a cinder block or an old tire or something to raise the back of the calf hutch a good 6 to 8 inches. And then making sure that all of the doors are open on the calf hutch so that when there is some wind going through, we're going to get some nice cooler air into those calves.
Great. So it doesn't look like we have any other questions, Dr. Vicky. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Just that here at Armor Animal Health, we have several trained people who know how to design as well as evaluate your positive pressure ventilation systems. So if you don't have one and you're interested in one, let us know. We would be happy to help you design one. If you do have a PPV system that you just want to see how well it's working, again, let us know. We can come out and fog it and see if it's up to specs or if maybe there's some things that need to be changed. And one thing, when I do go out to the farm and take all those measurements for a PPV system, I'm discussing calf health in general. So it's not just about a PPV system. We're looking at diarrhea, we're looking at pneumonia, just other calf care. So it's a really good value for the time that is invested during these calf workups. So we're definitely here to help and let us know what we can do for you.
Absolutely. Yes. Like you said, it's not just taking measurements. You're looking at the overall calf health, and anyone would be lucky to have you come out and share your expertise with them. So thank you for your time today, Dr. Vicky.
Thank you, Katie.
We hope that you enjoyed today's live and you learned something new. And if you did, please share this on your news feed and on your timeline so that others can learn as well. It's also going to be available, like I said, on our YouTube channel. And please feel free, if you are watching the recorded version, also ask questions and we'll get those answered as well. After this live, we're going to post a survey in the comments below. Please take that survey. Let us know if there's a specific topic that you would like us to talk about in a future Facebook Live. We have 7 vets on staff that are eager to do Facebook Lives to help our producers and provide educational information that will help their bottom line. So let us know if there's a topic that you would like discussed. Next week on Have You Heard, we have Gabby, one of our very helpful inside sales reps. She's going to be talking with Dr. John Hutchinson from Merck, and they're going to be talking about strategic deworming. So we'll see you next Thursday at 3 p.m. Central Time on Have You Heard. Have a great day, everyone.